The lawyer's office felt smaller than it should have, like the walls were slowly closing in. The air smelled of dust, old files, and something bitter I couldn't name. I sat with my hands folded tightly in my lap, my heart beat loud enough that I was sure everyone could hear it. Across the table, my father sat straight, backed calm, almost bored. Beside him, my brother leaned back in his chair, relaxed, his confidence filling the room as if he already knew how this story would end. Grandpa had been gone only a month, yet it felt like a lifetime. He had been my safe place, the one who listened when no one else did, the one who believed effort mattered more than favoritism. As a child, I'd sit with him on the porch while he told me stories about fairness, about how a family should protect all its children, not just the loudest or strongest. Remembering those words now made my chest ache. The lawyer cleared his throat and began reading the will. His voice was steady, professional, detached. Each sentence felt heavier than the last. I waited for the moment where my name would be spoken, where Grandpa's love would be confirmed in ink and paper. The years rolled on, and life settled into a rhythm I had never imagined possible. My business grew steadily, not as flashy as my brother's loud displays of wealth, but solid, resilient, and built entirely on my own effort. I moved into a modest apartment near the office, far from the mansion that had once been my grandfather's, but it was mine in every sense that mattered. Every decision, every success, every late night spent building something from scratch was a quiet testament to what patience and persistence could achieve. Meanwhile, my father's health began to decline. The man who had once seemed untouchable, distant, and commanding was now frail, dependent, and in need of care. I didn't hesitate. Alongside my mother, I became his support, tending to him with steady hands and a calm heart. This was not out of obligation, nor was it revenge. It was out of choice, the kind of choice that comes from understanding the true meaning of family and love, even when it has been withheld. Sod visited occasionally, though less often than either of us might have liked. When he did, he was quieter now, subdued by experience, humbled by the responsibilities that money alone could never teach. He no longer boasted or compared, and I no longer envied. The past had been transformed, reshaped by time and effort, into a balance that felt right. One afternoon, as my father lay resting, he called me to sit with him alone. His voice was soft, tired, but uncharacteristically sincere. I thought inheritance was about power. He said, his eyes meeting mine, "I see now, your grandfather thought differently." I held his hand, feeling the frailty beneath his fingers. He believed in fairness. I replied gently, and in trusting those who are patient and honest with themselves. Tears filled his eyes. "Your mother, she was right to protect you," he whispered. In that moment, I realized that the envelope, the trust, and the years of quiet work had given me something far greater than money. They had given me dignity, independence, and a life I had built without seeking permission. The satisfaction was not in proving my father wrong, nor in my brother's humbled state, but in the knowledge that I had honored my grandfather's vision. I had grown into the person he knew I could be, resilient, wise, and self-sufficient. When my father passed, there was no argument over documents, no public battles over legacy. Life had quietly shifted, leaving me in a position of genuine fulfillment and peace. I stood one evening in the garden my grandfather had loved, now restored as a small community space. Children ran across the grass, laughter filling the air, and the plaque near the entrance read, "For those who give without being seen." I smiled, thinking of Grandpa and my mother, the two who had ensured that fairness and love could outlast betrayal. That was my true, quiet victory, a life built on strength, patience, and the subtle power of being underestimated, and yet rising higher than anyone could have imagined. Instead, the lawyer said, the entire inheritance, including the house, land, and savings, is to be transferred to the elder grandson. For a second, I didn't understand what he meant. Entire inheritance echoed in my head like a cruel joke. I turned toward my father, expecting confusion, anger, something, but he nodded once, as if this decision had been made long before today. That's what your grandfather wanted, he said calmly. My throat tightened. He promised we'd both be taken care of. I said, my voice barely steady. My father finally looked at me, his eyes distant, unmoved. Your brother needs it more. You've always been independent. You'll survive. Survive. Not live, not thrive, just survive. My brother glanced at me, sympathy barely masking relief. No hard feelings. He murmured, placing a hand on my shoulder. You know how these things go. I forced a nod, because arguing felt pointless. Because breaking down in front of them would have felt like losing twice. When we stepped outside, the sun was bright, cruelly normal. Life hadn't paused for my heartbreak. As I walked home alone, one truth settled painfully deep inside me. The inheritance wasn't the only thing I'd lost that day. I'd lost the illusion that love in our family was ever equally given. I didn't open the envelope right away. It sat on my desk as the house grew quiet, its pale surface almost glowing under the weak yellow light. My name was written on the front in my mother's handwriting, careful and familiar, the same way she used to label my school notebooks. That alone made my chest tighten. Whatever was inside carried weight. I could feel it. Earlier that evening, she had slipped it into my hands without a word. Her eyes were tired, red from crying, but there was something steady in them too, something controlled. This is for you. She had said softly. Not everything is what it seems. Now, alone in my room, I finally broke the seal. Inside were papers, old ones, legal documents, bank statements, property records, all neatly arranged as if they had been waiting for this exact moment. Beneath them was a folded letter, the paper yellowed at the edges, my grandfather's handwriting instantly recognizable. My hands began to shake as I opened it. My dear child, if you are reading this, then the day I feared has arrived. Tears blurred the words, but I kept reading. Your father believes fairness is measured by authority. I believe it is measured by the heart. I watched both of my grandsons grow, and I saw who gave quietly and who learned to take without looking back. Memories rushed in. Grandpa pressing money into my hand when I tried to refuse. Grandpa listening while I talked about my dreams, even when no one else had time. The letter explained everything. Years ago, Grandpa had sold a small piece of land without telling anyone. He had invested the money carefully, placing it under my mother's name, then locking it away in a trust meant only for me, not as a reward but as protection. By the time I finished reading, tears were falling freely. My mother knocked gently before entering. She sat beside me on the bed, her presence grounding me. Your father never knew. She said quietly, your grandfather trusted me to keep this safe until you were strong enough to stand on your own. Why didn't you tell him? I asked, my voice breaking. She smiled, a sad but knowing smile. Because some truths are meant to be revealed only after injustice shows its face. I looked back at the documents. It wasn't just money. It was choice. It was security. It was proof that someone had seen me all along. That night, my pain didn't disappear, but it changed. Betrayal no longer felt like the end of my story. It felt like the beginning of a different one, written quietly, patiently, by love that didn't need applause to be real. And for the first time since the will was read, I slept without feeling empty. The years that followed were quiet, almost invisible to the rest of my family. That was intentional. I didn't announce my plans or explain my choices. I let everyone believe the story they were most comfortable with, that I had simply accepted my place and moved on. In reality, I was building something piece by piece, far away from their expectations. I used the trust carefully, exactly as Grandpa would have wanted. I went back to school, taking classes at night while working during the day. I learned skills I had once only dreamed about, staying up late with books spread across my desk, fueled by determination rather than anger. Each small success felt personal, like a quiet conversation between me and the man who had believed in me when it mattered most. Meanwhile, my brother stepped into his inheritance loudly. He renovated Grandpa's house, hosted gatherings, and spoke proudly about family legacy. Photos appeared online, full of smiles and celebrations. My father visited often, his approval obvious in the way he bragged to relatives about how well his son was managing everything. No one asked how I was doing, and strangely, that stopped hurting. Time has a way of revealing what money cannot fix. Repairs on the house became expensive. Investments didn't return what my brother expected. Responsibilities he'd never carried before began to weigh on him. The confidence he once wore so easily started to crack. Then the calls began. At first, they were casual. "How are you?" my father asked, his voice unfamiliar, careful. Later, they became more direct. "Your brother could use some advice," he said one evening. "You've always been practical." I agreed to meet my brother months later, when he finally came to see me himself. He stood in the doorway of my small but thriving office, looking around slowly, as if trying to understand how I had gotten there. My name was on the door. My work filled the space. There was no inheritance behind it, no safety net he could point to. "I didn't know you were doing this well," he admitted quietly. I studied his face and felt no anger. "Only clarity. You never asked." I said calmly. He hesitated, then spoke the truth he'd been avoiding. He wanted help, not just money, but direction. For a moment, I considered everything I could say, everything I had once wished someone would say to me. Instead, I offered guidance, not rescue, structure, not shortcuts. As he left, I realized something important. My revenge had never been about watching him fail. It was about proving to myself that being overlooked had never meant being incapable. Silence had become my strength, and strength, once earned, didn't need to be loud to be undeniable.